Hello, I'd like to welcome you and introduce you to My Health Dashboard. This is a system that you can use to monitor your patients and your own health. During this time of COVID, it is much more difficult to get your patients into the office. It is preferable to monitor their health while they're at home. This is a method you can use to do that. You can monitor various metrics like their overall well-being, their blood pressure, heart rate, their temperature. You can also monitor their water intake, their diet, their activity level, and their quality of sleep. More importantly, you can track any goals that you have for them and their adherence to those goals, like medication adherence. You can also use this dashboard to measure the efficacy of any treatment you are using. So let's go into more detail about the fine points of how to use this dashboard for you and your patients. You'll notice in the top left-hand corner you can select from a list of patients. Once you select a patient, then all the graphs on this dashboard update accordingly. Likewise, you can select a date range. If we select the last 9 months of data, the graphs will update accordingly. Each of these squares represent a different area of health. The spirit category of health is meant to encompass the psychological and social determinants of health. I'm currently using it to monitor the review of systems trends, but it can also be used for heart rate variability, cortisol levels, things like that. The oxygen category is meant to encompass anything that affects the body's oxygenation levels and utilization of oxygen in the production of energy for the human body. So that includes blood pressure and heart rate, respiratory rate and oxygen percentage, temperature, and pain level. You'll notice if we hover over these red bars, then it shows that the respiratory rate is 30. So anything above 26 is a warning sign. And we can click on that day and it'll update the rest of the graph so we can get an idea of what was going on in other areas of health. So on that day, this patient had a heart rate of 84 and a temperature of 97.5. So it was unlikely that this patient had pneumonia, even though they had a respiratory rate that was above average. And when we select something other than that graph, then all the graphs return back to normal. The water category is meant to encompass anything that affects the body's intake of water as well as the body's utilization of water. So we have a graph here representing urine output and the average water goal. So you see on most days this patient drank 3 times the amount of water necessary and their urine output was quite good most days. You see there's a few days when urine output dropped pretty low, indicated by these red bars here, but most days it was average or above average, indicated by these green and yellow bars. Likewise, this patient drinks plenty of water, indicated by 150% of the recommended goal, and that goal is coming from a Hidrate Spark water bottle that automatically tracks the patient's water intake. You can even graph a patient's urine pH if that is valuable to the protocol that you are using. You see an acidic pH is indicated in red, whereas a more alkaline pH is indicated here in green. The diet category indicates everything that the patient eats. Here we see a graph of the breakdown percentage of carb, protein, and fat in their diet. If you hover over one bar, it shows that we have 62% of the diet is made up of carbohydrates and only 20% made up of fat. And we can get an idea of when those things were eaten through this graph. So the most protein in this patient's diet was eaten during breakfast and lunch, and not quite as much during dinner. To log your food, I recommend Carb Manager because it makes it easy to log your food just by speaking into your phone. It has a vibrant community and lots of great recipes. It's also easy to add your own foods and generate a report of those foods and the macronutrients and micronutrients of those foods. You can also track a patient's activity level through the exercise category. These red bars give you an activity score. This is based on data from an Oura Ring. It's a ring that the patient wears and it tracks their heart rate and their body temperature in order to determine their level of activity and their sleep quality. So you see here that this patient is not very active. Their activity score is in the 50th percentile and their weight is increasing. Less than 1% is of high intensity activity. Rest is one of those very important things that allow us to recover. The amount of rest can actually be tracked through this category of health. This graph depicts the results of a person's sleep that spends 14% of their sleep time in REM sleep, whereas 13% is deep sleep. 21% of their time in bed is spent awake. A large portion, 50%, is spent in light sleep. This is the graph of a healthy individual. If they were getting less REM sleep and less deep sleep, they would feel much less rejuvenated when they woke up in the morning. And you can see here an hour of their hours, minutes, and seconds spent in each category of sleep. So that's 1 hour and 15 minutes spent in REM sleep, which is good. Here is another graph of sleep and readiness. So the green and yellow bars represent a person's readiness score, and that score comes from the Oura Ring as well. So you see their readiness score on most days is above 70%, which is good. Green is indicating good, yellow and red not so good. And this blue line and this red line are an indication of the sleep that the person is getting. So out of this total sleep, how much is spent in deep sleep? And you see a positive correlation. When there's more time spent in deep sleep, then the readiness score improves, as long as there is a sufficient amount of sleep on that day. This goals calendar can be used to track the patient's adherence to any goal that he sets or the physician sets. For example, if you want to get an indication of how consistent the patient is with taking their medication, this graph can track that. The darker the square, the higher their consistency is with their prescribed medications. So on this day, they took 96% of their prescribed medications, whereas on this day, the patient took 0%, and this day, only 55%. So that calendar/heat map is a good way to track the patient's goals. If you would like to change the metric or the goal depicted by this calendar, that can be changed simply by going to View, Selection, and then we select that calendar. Once we've selected that calendar, we open up the Fields column and we can navigate to, let's see, we'll also want to open up the Visualizations column. And we see here the date and the medication adherence is depicted on that graph. So all we want to do is drag something else into that graph there. So we'll open up our key measures, and this graph depicts data that is a percentage. So anything ending in score will work. So we'll type in score in this search bar and it pulls up the key measures that have a score, because all of those are percentage metrics. So if we wanted to graph our treatment score, all we would have to do is click this X here to remove medication adherence, and click this box or drag and drop this treatment into that values square. The treatment category is meant to track and monitor a patient's results and their response to treatment. This particular graph is depicting tumor volume for a patient, but this could also be used for a diabetic's A1C value or a hypertensive patient's systolic blood pressure. We get an idea of the events that were occurring in each treatment. So we have the date and the event that happened on that date, and in the top right hand corner you'll also see the tumor volume in centimeters cubed. And this graph to the right is an indication of the patient's adherence to treatment. This could easily be replaced by a picture of the results that the patient is getting. You'll also notice that in the center of this dashboard we have a balance graph. This yellow circle is meant to represent the overall balance score for each of the categories of health. If we select on it, we can see that it's a little above 50%, and that score is actually an average of the different categories of health. So all these 6 different categories of health are depicted in circles in in rings on this graph. If you hover over it, you see the rest score is 76%, whereas the oxygen score is 47%. And so you can easily hone in on the weak areas for each patient and focus on those areas first. So I invite you to download and try out My Health Dashboard for yourself and start tracking your data or your patient's data or your family's data. This dashboard is free to use. It runs on a platform called Power BI that is available for free from Microsoft. And this dashboard is also provided to you for free. So go ahead and try it out today and let me know what you think of it. Please post your comments in the discussion box below. And if you like what you see, then hit that subscribe button and you will be notified anytime there is a new video tutorial on how to use this dashboard. Until next time, take care.